Penguin Random House Audio presents The Lives of the Caesars by Suetonius, translated by Tom Holland, read for you by Justin Avoth, with an introduction written and read by Tom Holland.
Introduction. Sometime in the early 9th century AD, a Frankish scholar named Einhard sat down to write a biography. His theme was a worthy one. Charlemagne, the greatest king of his age, had died in 814, after a reign of almost 50 years. During that time he had won many wars, sponsored numerous reforms, and served as the patron of a golden age of learning. The surest measure of his achievements was that in 800, in Rome itself, he had been crowned emperor, the heir of the Caesars. Centuries might have passed since the collapse of Roman rule in Western Europe, but the allure, the charisma, the prestige of the vanished empire still haunted Frankish scholars. This was why, when Einhard sought a model for his biography of Charlemagne, he turned not to a recent source, not to the life of a saint or a Christian ruler, but to an older text by far. Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus had lived some 7 centuries previously, during the heyday of Roman power, and a single copy of his most famous work, a series of biographies of the Caesars, had been preserved in a Frankish monastery. This text, a precious survivor into the age of Charlemagne, constituted a great compendium of riches, details, many of them startlingly personal and intimate, of the first Roman emperors. Unsurprisingly then, Einhard treasured it. He knew what fortune had preserved for him, the very template of how to write about a Caesar. 12 lives in all featured in Suetonius's collection. The first was that of Julius Caesar, the dictator whose name had become synonymous with imperial rule. The last, that of Domitian, an emperor who had come to power 81 years after the birth of Christ. The biography that most interested Einhard, however, was the second, the longest and most detailed in Suetonius's collection. Augustus, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, had been commemorated by the Romans as the first and greatest of their emperors, a ruler who had laid the vast edifice of Roman power on such solid and splendid foundations that still, long after its collapse in Western Europe, it served the Franks as the great exemplar of an empire. To Einhard, the comparison with Charlemagne appeared obvious. Accordingly, when he wrote his biography, the Frankish scholar modelled it on Suetonius's portrait of the first Roman emperor. Just as Charlemagne had done, Augustus had fought wars, passed laws, and presided over a golden age. Suetonius, however, had not rested content with detailing the emperor's achievements. Now, he had written, having provided a summary of his life, I will go through it detail by detail, not chronologically, but ordered by theme, so that each topic can be rendered more clearly and intelligibly. He had been as good as his word. Barely an aspect of Augustus's character had been regarded by Suetonius as too trivial to merit his attention. The emperor's physical appearance, his tastes in food and drink, his sex life, all had received scrupulous attention. Einhard, studying Suetonius's method closely, had absorbed the lesson. In his own biography, narratives of Charlemagne's conquests were combined with the most personal details. The value of Suetonius as a serviceable exemplar to Christian scholars was decisively demonstrated. His reputation as the model of how to write the biography of a great ruler was ensured. In a similar manner, the 12 Caesars whose lives constituted the theme of his collection were enshrined for medieval Europe as the very archetypes of emperors. And so they remain to this day. That Rome tends to live more vividly in people's imaginings than other ancient empires owes an inordinate amount to Suetonius. Pharaohs and shahs may have presided over civilizations quite as brilliant and influential, but no one ever wrote about them as Suetonius wrote about the Caesars. His subjects seem familiar to us, as do few other rulers from antiquity. They wrestle with funding shortfalls, foreign policy crises, and sex scandals. We're shown their tastes, their foibles, their eccentricities. We see them eat, drink, marry, divorce, get angry, make jokes, take exercise, urinate, listen to people break wind, tie up their sandals. The chilly marble of their portrait busts is transfigured into flesh and blood. Yet just as they can seem something familiar, political figures we might almost imagine being dissected on social media, so at the same time is it a potent part of their fascination that, like long-extinct apex predators, the Caesars portrayed in Suetonius's great collection of biographies are alien, terrifying, strange. Even Augustus, the emperor who served Einhard as the model for his portrayal of Charlemagne, is described, during his rise to power, as committing acts of chilling cruelty, gouging out the eyes of a suspected spy with his thumbs, butchering 300 human victims in sacrifice. The portrait of the imperial court that we gain from Suetonius's collection of biographies is one repeatedly blotted by perversities and crimes. If Einhard located in the life of Augustus a model that might serve a Christian king, then others have found in the lives of Caligula or Nero altogether more sinister examples. Gilles de Rais, a French knight who was hanged in 1440 for the murder of hundreds of children, was alleged to have been seduced into committing his monstrous crimes by the experience of reading Suetonius. The Marquis de Sade kept a copy in his library. Many was the translation published in the Victorian period that would replace entire paragraphs with a discreet line of asterisks. Even today, in a far more permissive age, there are passages in Suetonius's lives that retain their power to shock and appall. The court of the Caesars remains an unnerving place. Yet to regard Suetonius merely as a purveyor of scandal and sensation, the Roman equivalent of clickbait, would be to miss entirely what Einhard had found in his extraordinary work, a portrait of power at its most imperial. That each of the 12 lives contains a great treasure trove of detail and anecdote does not render them any the less valuable as an analysis of what it meant to rule as an emperor over the Roman world. If Suetonius entertains, then so also does he educate. A remarkably well-informed scholar, whose curiosity and learning embraced an immense range of subjects, he was as fascinated by genealogy or jury reform or regulation of the corn supply or military institutions or Greek literature or graphology as he was by more obviously lurid themes. His supreme achievement as a biographer was to demonstrate that a portrait might be drawn of a ruler in which personality and policy were so interfused as in effect to be indistinguishable. What happened at a Caesar's table or in his bedroom, he sought to demonstrate, was bound to inform what happened across the vast expanse of the empire. The measure of Suetonius's success is that still, to this day, nothing so dominates the public perception of the period covered by his biographies as the characters of those who ruled the Roman world. He did not just stamp forever the way that posterity would remember Caligula or Nero. He also played a key role in ensuring that posterity would remember them in the first place. Yet indelibly though the various emperors are drawn, the lives of the Caesars ranks as much more than a collection of individual biographies. Read in its entirety, it furnishes a sweeping analysis of how, over the course of a century and a half, autocracy came to bed itself down in the Roman state, evolve, and replicate itself. Not just a great dynastic drama, one in which the shadows of dead Caesars, Julius Caesar himself, Augustus, Nero, fall dark over their successors. It is a drama shaped as well by its interplay with a further dimension, that of the supernatural. So rooted in the diurnal realities of political life are Suetonius's biographies that the intrusions of the otherworldly, no matter how repeatedly they occur, invariably serve to deliver a jolt. Ghosts are glimpsed on lonely roads, phantoms.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?